When silence was louder than words, the world assumed she had nothing to say. They mistook her quiet for weakness, her restraint for surrender. In rooms filled with voices that talked over her, decisions were made without her name ever being spoken. People believed power belonged to those who shouted the most, not to the one who watched, learned, and endured. But what they never understood was this: silence is not emptiness. Sometimes silence is the sound of strength gathering itself, and when she finally chose to break it, the echo changed everything. She learned early that speaking did not always mean being heard. As a child, whenever she tried to explain herself, adults dismissed her with gentle smiles or sharp warnings. "Be quiet," they said, as if her thoughts were too heavy for the room. She noticed how boys were encouraged to be bold while girls were praised for being agreeable. Each time she swallowed her words, something hardened inside her, not into bitterness, but into awareness. She began to observe. She noticed patterns. She understood that the world was not fair, but it was predictable, and predictability could be used. At school, she sat in the back, not because she lacked confidence, but because she preferred clarity over chaos. She watched teachers favor loud answers over thoughtful ones. She saw classmates confuse attention with intelligence. When she raised her hand, she spoke carefully, choosing words like stepping stones across a river. Some laughed, some ignored her, but she never stopped thinking. Silence became her shield, a place where she refined herself while others wasted energy trying to be seen. As she grew older, the pressure to conform grew louder. Society handed her a script: be polite, be patient, be grateful, even when you are overlooked. When she was wronged, she was told to let it go. When she was underestimated, she was told to wait her turn. When she was hurt, she was told to stay quiet to keep the peace. And for a long time she did, not because she was afraid, but because she was studying the cost of speaking too soon. People around her mistook her calm for compliance. At work, her ideas were repeated by others and applauded as if they were new. She watched men receive credit for conclusions she had already reached in silence. When she pointed this out softly, she was labeled difficult. When she stayed quiet, she was invisible. Either way, she learned, the system was not designed for her voice, so she stopped trying to fit into it. Instead, she started building herself outside of it. At night, when the world finally stopped demanding her silence, she worked. She read what others ignored. She trained skills no one applauded yet. She failed privately and learned relentlessly. While others sought validation, she sought mastery. Silence gave her space to grow without distraction. No one clapped for her progress, and that was the point. She was no longer performing for approval. She was preparing for impact. There were moments when the loneliness felt heavy. Silence can be misunderstood not just by others, but by the one who carries it. Doubt tried to creep in, whispering that maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't matter as much as she believed. But every time that thought appeared, she answered it with action. Another page read, another skill sharpened, another boundary quietly placed. She learned that confidence does not always roar. Sometimes it hums steadily, unshaken by noise. Family gatherings tested her the most. Questions came wrapped in concern but carried judgment. Why are you still like this? Why don't you speak up more? Why aren't you married yet? Why don't you settle? Each question assumed something was missing in her life. They didn't see the discipline, the purpose, the self-respect growing beneath her silence. She smiled, nodded, and chose not to explain. She had learned that explanations are wasted on those who have already decided who you are. Then came the moment that changed everything. Not a dramatic argument, not a public confrontation, just a decision. She realized that silence should be a choice, not a cage. She didn't need to become loud to be powerful, but she needed to become intentional. From that day on, she spoke when it mattered. Not to prove herself, but to protect herself. Not to impress, but to correct. The first time she asserted herself, the room shifted. People were surprised, not because her words were aggressive, but because they were precise. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't apologize for existing. She stated facts, set boundaries, and walked away without waiting for permission. Some resisted, some felt threatened, some suddenly remembered her name. Silence had taught her patience, and patience had taught her timing. At work, she stopped letting her ideas be taken. She documented everything. She spoke clearly and briefly. When interrupted, she paused, waited, and continued without shrinking. The same people who once ignored her now listened carefully, not because she had changed who she was, but because she had changed how she allowed herself to be treated. Respect, she learned, often follows self-respect. Her transformation was quiet, but undeniable. Opportunities appeared where there had once been walls. People sought her opinion, sensing depth where they had once assumed emptiness. She didn't gloat. She didn't seek revenge. She simply moved forward, unburdened by the need to be understood by everyone. Silence had been her training ground, not her prison. What made her powerful was not that she suffered silently, but that she refused to let silence define her worth. She never played the victim. She never begged for a seat at the table. She built her own and invited only those who respected her presence. Her past no longer haunted her. It informed her. Every ignored moment became fuel. Every dismissed word became foundation. When people asked how she became so strong, she didn't give speeches. She didn't explain her journey in detail. She simply said, "I listened when no one else did." She listened to patterns. She listened to herself. She listened to what pain was teaching instead of what fear was shouting. In a world addicted to noise, she proved that silence, when chosen, can be revolutionary. Not all battles require shouting. Some are won by endurance, clarity, and the courage to speak only when your voice is ready to change the room. And when she finally spoke fully, the world realized what it had ignored for far too long. Silence had been louder than words, but her actions became louder than both.